Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walden University. And in this video, I'm going to be going over understanding clinical trials. But instead of understanding clinical trials, I'm going to just start talking about rethinking clinical trials. And this is really important because clinical trials have long been considered, have hailed, has been hailed as the gold standard for understanding clinical research, the effect of medications, side effects, everything. But the reality is that there's severe drawbacks to the systems that we have in place currently. First of all, many of the sample sizes lack power. They're smaller. There's smaller ends, which also means that when you have disaggregated data, so when you have data on, say, ethnicity or some other sort of disaggregated data, then this becomes problematic as well. So we really have to rethink clinical trials, and this is a brand new set of modules that have been put in place by the NIH, and they call it the living textbook of pragmatic clinical trials. And it's rethinking clinical trials. And you start off by watching the video, and I personally have a weakness for websites and books and things that have videos in them, because they're actually, then you know that they're active, and they can actually be changing. There's a lot of virtual workshops that also exist, and of course, depending on when you're viewing this, that this may change. But it's called the Collaboratory, the Pragmatic Trials Collaboratory. And in a minute, I'm going to try to get into this a little bit, the different chapters, and take a look, take you through a tour, and how everything is set up. But that is kind of the that sums up what this is all about. But here's some demonstration projects. There's a lot of case studies in here. There's a lot of different things included in here. So what I'm saying is that um, the mission is strengthening national capacity to implement cost-effective, large-scale research studies that engage healthcare delivery organizations as research partners. So there's a lot of potential in this, and many more people can get involved in not only the actual researching portion, but collected data can then be analyzed in different ways, and that is the power of what's incorporated into here. Um, there's some actual projects which you can peruse through in the bottom. Kaiser Foundation Research Institute, looking at chronic low back pain, which is, of course, always an important matter to be thinking about, and the use of a pragmatic trial for acupuncture. And the idea behind a pragmatic trial versus a regular clinical trial, I think, now that I've talked about it a bit, let me tell you what the differences are. The main difference is that data collection is taking place instead of in a controlled environment, in sort of looking at something separately. This is kind of simultaneously happening. So the data is being collected as within patient centers, hospitals, for clinical trials. And so you might be asking the question, this was happening already, but this in a more systematic, renewed manner, in the way that has been laid out in detail within these chapters. I encourage you to go through these chapters, very important chapters. Take a look at some of these studies too, though. Pain management is huge, and as you can see, pain management, chronic low back pain, something that really needs a lot more research on. It's tragic. Unfortunately, there was in fact a mass shooting that took place as a result of miscommunication from low back pain that actually happened in the last month. And so another area, and it seems like there's a lot of mindfulness research, at least in this section, and also chronic sickle cell disease pain. Something that is also very important to be thinking about. But this is also known as kind of embedded clinical trials. And let me take you back to this. So these are some demonstration projects which I encourage you to go through. Here's a core working groups that's working on this. There's a biostats study design, and they create technical documents um, and so these were the sections of the living document that these contributors were responsible for. So anyway, what is in fact within the chapters? Well, there's design, there's data tools and conduct, and then dissemination. So these are the three types of sections that this is divided into. So what is interesting is that the analysis plan is in fact so early, and there's a lot of time that has been spent and a lot of effort in this chapter to try to look at how to randomize, and that's important too. But also intra-class correlation coefficient. So randomization is actually obviously one of the fundamental things in controlled trials, but there's this interclass correlation coefficient that you can use, and obviously if it's 1, then it's completely correlated. 0, no correlation, and so with these trials, that can actually determine sample size needed. So that is the importance of the ICC number. Is that how closely correlated are they to each other? If within a single community there's not too much difference, so then you might need a lower sample size than if there's more variation within a community. Also, medication adherence is another area that was studied here. So anyway, I'm spending too much time in one place, but this is an example of one measure that needs to be looked at when thinking about clinical trials here. And the reason I like this is because it goes into why it's important, and why it's important in modeling. So if you have unequal cluster sizes, this is something that is treated, and I talk about this a lot. Then you have to, in a trial that randomly assigns clinics to an intervention that will be applied to patients who are newly diagnosed with diabetes, the statistician will need information about the number of such patients coming into each clinic over the past several months, and then the range in sample sizes that are needed in each of the places. Of course, residual confounding analysis is something else. Cluster level covariates might be important for balancing across the arms of the study. So cluster level covariates may be different. And a lot of this I do in geospatial analysis as well. So I'm not going to go through the whole book. That's not the intention, or the scope, or be within the scope of this whole lecture. But the idea is for you to understand that there's more out there than just a randomized controlled trial, and that these uh, pragmatic clinical trials are in fact something that is being put in place. And there's examples of real life embedded data, and how you acquire this real world data is you try to look for different data sources. It might be you might need different permissions or contact people, or it might be readily available from secondary data sets. So this goes into a little bit more about that. And then you go into the Translate ACS case study. Then you have a computable phenotype, which talks about the idea of phenotypes and using phenotypes in pragmatic clinical trials. The phenotype definition, of course, people should operationalize before they use, but in validation testing, this is really important. So identify the candidate phenotype, analyze existing EHR definitions to identify authoritative computable phenotypes, determine gold standard clinical definition source, develop protocol for chart review, develop statistical analysis plan and data collection form, implement selected computable phenotypes with EHR data. So all of this is a combination. What I'm trying to show you here is that all of this is a combination of informaticians, clinicians, and where it's a joint effort. And so providing this sort of research allows for this joint effort to take place. Here was a practical framework to compute phenotypes, and this is in fact something, if you're first learning research, this might be something that you might want to look into, because it gives kind of a paradigm as to how to do one of these studies. So take a look at this if you're looking to implement some sort of data set, and trying to understand what type of data set it is. For instance, data elements and modalities required, value sets, relationships to other data sets, machine readable, things like that. So what have we gone over in this video? So the main thing that I want you to take home with you is the pragmatic clinical trials, the existence of pragmatic clinical trials, how these are embedded clinical trials within, they're intended to be embedded within the normal daily workflow and not interrupt, and collect information and valuable clinical research that can then be used to make informed clinical decisions. Look, there's not enough being done in terms of having clinical trials. to inform decisions. So physicians are having to make decisions based on value judgments and kind of rough estimates. So we need to ramp up how much of this is done. And you don't have to be there actually seeing the patients. There has been a lot of information and a lot of data that already has been collected in this manner. But take some time to go through the different parts of this wonderful living textbook that's been written by the NIH regarding pragmatic clinical trials. Thank you for listening. As a quick added bonus, I wanted to add this portion of the embedded PCT team composition. Very important, this idea of the embedded portion of this. When I was in conversations with doctors Susu Baka, Heidi Chumley, and Murnak Marna Canna Wolf Brand, we talked about the idea of providing embedded flexibilization within the classroom. And so the concept there was very similar to what is being proposed here. And the translatability here, I wanted to kind of explain to you in this bonus scene of teaching. Embedded embedded PCT, you can look at this 10-minute video by Dr. Simon. It's interesting, and this actually goes into some team members that could be provided as part of when you're writing up maybe grants or things like that, and the roles and expertise of each and every individual that may be in a research team that might be, including a clinic champion, that might be good as part of your team. There's actually a Pico tool that I've immensely explained to you about, but also the Precise 2 tool, which is important. The Precise 2 tool is Pragmatic Explanatory Consortium Indicator Summary, and it's revised in 2015. And it offers a framework to guide study teams to prospectively consider the pragmatic or explanatory nature of their trial across 9 domains. So this is another 9-minute video, but it's really interesting because the 9 domains have been laid out kind of one by one in an important manner. And one is explanatory and the other extreme is pragmatic. So explanatory means that highly selected patients, strict inclusion criteria. Pragmatic, typical patients, minimal inclusion criteria. So this is the contrast, and I think this contrast by criteria: eligibility, recruitment, setting, organization, flexibility, delivery, flexibility, adherence, follow-up, primary outcome, primary analysis is really good. And there's also a wheel diagram, I think, that really helps to provide some extremely helpful insight. So what would it look like, the one that you are developing, and you want to ask some elements, characteristics and elements about the research question. And these are some important research questions. Setting, so it's embedded in the routine care setting. Participants, intervention and comparator outcomes, clinical importance. So this is kind of similar to PICO, but it has some modifications, and this is the Precise 2 tool. So this is another example of embedded flexibilization, but embedded into the clinical trials section of this. Thank you for listening.